Welcome back to another WorkSource Spokane training module. This is AI 103. This is the third module in our AI series. And in today's module, we're going to be discussing two different AI programs, Copilot and Gemini. Our agenda for this module is going to be kind of brief because we only have really two topics that we're going to be talking about. We're going to do a bit of a deep dive into Copilot, what Copilot is, and also with that, we're going to talk about Microsoft's data security philosophy and why that's a big deal going into this kind of new AI environment. On the other side of that coin, we're going to talk about Google's Gemini and what Gemini brings to the table. And with that, we're going to do a bit of a comparative analysis between what Copilot can do and what Gemini can do and what the pros and cons of each of those might be. At the end, of course, we're going to have a conclusion, and throughout all of this, I am going to do some live demonstrations talking to both Copilot and Gemini. So let's start off with our first AI, Copilot. Now, if you've been working with AI for the last year or so, you've probably heard of Copilot, or you may have heard of what it's based on, ChatGPT. Copilot is a GPT model that was made by Microsoft, and by definition, and when I say by definition, I literally asked Copilot to define itself. And this is what Copilot told me. Copilot is an advanced AI companion developed by Microsoft designed to enhance productivity, creativity, and efficiency in various tasks. Now, note the wording that it used there. Enhance, not replace. A lot of the AIs that we're talking about here in the modern world, they're designed to be tools to use to enhance the things that we already do normally as humans. And even the AI that I use most frequently, Microsoft's Copilot, understands that. Now, going along with other things that Copilot can do, Copilot leverages cutting-edge AI technologies. That sounds like a whole lot of corporate buzzwords to me, but there's some truth to it. AI is leveraging things like machine learning, deep learning, and neural networks, all those things that we talked about in the previous module to enhance the things that we can do as humans. Now, this could be something like providing some intelligent suggestions, which Copilot has provided me with some really good suggestions over the last year, or other things like assisting in writing. Much like what I am reading right now, the very description that I'm reading of Copilot was written by Copilot. I used Copilot to write this description because I didn't have time to write it all out myself. There's other things that Copilot can do, like coding, data analysis, content generation. Now, when I talk about content generation and coding and things like that, I have asked Copilot to help me with things like writing Excel formulas. Very complex Excel formulas, much more complex than what I might teach in my Excel module. I've had Copilot assist me with writing song lyrics. I've had Copilot assist me with generating images. So there's a lot that goes into what Copilot is capable of. But even beyond some of those creative tasks, Copilot has an advantage. Because Copilot was created by Microsoft, well, Copilot can integrate with the entire Microsoft ecosystem. So I mentioned Excel just a few seconds ago. With a Copilot subscription, you can actually use Copilot within a lot of your Office 365 applications, and you can use Copilot to enhance the way you use those programs. I'm very much a fan of saying, I'm not a master at any of this. I'm not a master at Excel. I'm not a master at PowerPoint. I'm barely even good at Microsoft Word. But by using Copilot to enhance what I already know, it makes me that more effective at using those programs. So how does Copilot and Microsoft really kind of implement a lot of the things that it's capable of doing while still maintaining a sense of ethics and safety? There's a couple different ways. The very first one, and all of this is going to come back to user data and user data security. One of the ways that Microsoft helps ensure that the user data is protected is by minimizing the amount of data that Copilot has access to, and additionally, making sure that that user data is anonymous. I use Copilot almost on a daily basis. And while Copilot knows who I am because I refer to myself as Tyler when I talk to Copilot, Copilot doesn't necessarily save any specific information about me specifically. And it only accesses the things that I absolutely need it to access to. Now, I use the free version of Copilot. I do not pay for Copilot Pro, so I don't have Copilot integrated with all of my Office applications. And that helps keep me safe because it minimizes the amount of data that Copilot has access to. Even if I did pay for the Copilot Pro, the more enhanced versions, Copilot would only have access to what I allow it to have access to. This helps keep our information safe. Now, there's many other parts to that. Another part of that is encryption. And we've talked about encryption in other different modules. It just helps make sure that any data that's being sent back and forth from my machine to the Microsoft servers to Copilot is encrypted in transit. So that way, if somebody tries to do a man-in-the-middle attack or intercept that data, it's essentially useless to them. Now, another way that Copilot helps keep our information safe is through compliance with regulations. Now, one of the things that we talked about in AI 102 was how, was it 102 or 101? It was one of the previous modules. We talked about how when it comes to AI and the regulation of AI, governments around the world and just even computer professionals, researchers in general, have kind of set up their own kind of ethical networks to help with that. AI ethics is an important thing. Well, there are certain regulations that actually exist to help with that. One of those is an acronym, you've probably never heard of this, GDPR, which is standing for General Data Protection Regulation. And there's another one that goes along with that. GDPR is the US version. Over in Europe, they have the European Union Data Boundary. This ensures that any data that's being handled by Copilot is up to snuff to their ethical and legal standards. Another way that Copilot and Microsoft help keep our information safe is through user control and transparency. Every user that uses Copilot has complete control over their individual data. Now, again, that data is anonymous to Microsoft. Microsoft can't see who's using what, and it allows us as users, the end users of the product, to be able to delete it if we wanted to, or modify it, or even just access it to see what's there. Another way to help with our safety is through prompt injection protection. Now, there's probably a lot more details that go into that than I'm going to be able to explain here in this short video, but this just ensures that there aren't going to be any jailbreaking attacks, and it helps ensure that any harmful content is blocked. That way, if Copilot tries to access some information that might be, shall we say, less than savory, it won't come through to us as the end users. Finally, we have data residency. And this is a service offered by Microsoft to allow organizations like the organizations I work for, the Employment Security Department, to choose where their data is stored and how it's processed. This, again, helps ensure that our information stays safe. So let's talk a little bit about Microsoft's data security philosophy. Now, when it comes to the context of AI, there's really three key principles that we want to focus on, but there's a couple of other things as well. The big three is responsibility, transparency, and user empowerment. And you kind of saw that when we talked about some of their ethics. Microsoft is a very big fan of individual responsibility. Microsoft takes a proactive approach to data security, ensuring that AI systems are designed with robust security measures from the ground up. This includes encryption, as we talked about with the data going back and forth, access controls to make sure that us as users are able to see what data and be able to control what data Copilot has access to, and then continuous monitoring. It's not just setting up the system, but it's also making sure that the system stays safe as it continues to evolve. Number 2 on this list is transparency. Microsoft is committed to being transparent about how data is collected, used, and protected. Now, this involves clear communications with the users about privacy policies, consent mechanisms, and regular updates to those data policies. Number 3 is user empowerment. And as I mentioned on the previous slide, us as the end users, we have complete control over our data, including the ability to be able to delete it if we want to. Compliance and governance through global data protection regulations like the GDPR. This helps make sure that any AI frameworks that Copilot is using are used ethically and responsibly. Now, as we go past those main 3, we also have a couple of other things that are part of that philosophy. Innovation with safety is going to be another big one. While we are pushing the boundaries of what AI is capable of, that doesn't mean that we stop being safe about things. Exploration already has its own share of risks involved, but as Copilot gains new abilities, as Microsoft implements new features, they're going to make sure that these things are done with safety. So that way there's no risk of things getting misused or prevent any kind of bias. The final thing is collaboration and integration. Microsoft integrates data security and governance across all of its platforms. And this is one of the major reasons why Copilot is the AI that has been chosen by the Employment Security Department to be used on their backbone, on their particular systems. We don't get a chance to use any other AIs with our ESD systems. Only Copilot is the one that's authorized because Microsoft has such robust data security policies already in place for things like their Microsoft Outlook or some of their other Microsoft applications. It only makes sense for us to use Copilot because it uses the same data security policies. Now, while I just mentioned that Copilot is the AI that is used by the Employment Security Department, I don't work for the Employment Security Department. So I might use other AIs, and you as a job seeker are not beholden to only using Copilot. There are other AIs that exist out there. One of those other ones is Google's Gemini. Gemini, by Gemini's definition, and just like I did with Copilot, I actually went to Gemini itself and asked Gemini, define yourself. What are you? Who are you? Who made you? What are the details behind that? And this is what Gemini told me. Gemini is a next-generation large language model developed by Google DeepMind. Gemini was launched in December of 2023, which is right on track with when Copilot and some of the other AIs started becoming real popular. Gemini is designed to understand and generate human-like text, making it a powerful tool with a wide range of applications. It is both the name of the chatbot and the underlying AI model. Now, this is different than some of the other AI models that Google has made in the past, and this is kind of like the evolution of the Google Assistant, and I kind of mentioned that in some of the previous modules. Now, Gemini is available in multiple different versions, just like you have Copilot and Copilot Pro. Well, you also have Gemini, Gemini Ultra, Gemini Pro, Gemini Flash, Gemini Nano, and each and every single one of those different kind of submodels are tailored to a specific different kind of use. Now, what makes Gemini so great as an AI model is the fact that it is integrated with the entire Google ecosystem. So it has access to the entirety of the Google search engine that we all know and love. That is a huge tool. And if you've taken my internet module, you know how much I love just Google by itself. Well, imagine now you now have an AI tool that has access to that same search engine and all of the intelligence, all of the data, all of the knowledge that's behind it. But it doesn't just stop there. We have the Google Workspace, like Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Slides. Gemini also integrates with those, much in the same way that Copilot integrates with Office 365. Google Gemini can integrate with the Google Workspace. Now, as a final part of all of this, we want to talk about the Google Pixel phones and Android. Android is owned by Google, and Google Pixels are some of the most, I would say, pure Android phones that you might be able to find. So Google Gemini has now been offered as a application on a lot of the Google Pixel phones and some of the other Android phones as well. This makes it a very accessible tool for a lot of folks. I usually am not using Google Assistant on my phone anymore. I'm actually talking to Gemini instead. This is a feature that we call Gemini Live. Now, I've been working with AI like Copilot and Gemini for a little over a year now. It's probably been a little bit longer than that, but I would say as far as my most heavy use has been for about a year and a half or so. And I just want to talk a little bit about some of the potential impacts of using tools like Copilot and Gemini, using some of these generative AIs that we've been talking about. So let's talk about some of the short-term impacts. On the very surface, AI increases productivity, hands down. If I am writing some feedback for an assignment, or I need to respond to an email or something like that, I may take what I write and put it into Copilot and have Copilot proofread it for me to make sure that it sounds good, sounds appropriate, that the grammar is correct. That in turn increases my productivity because that's less time I have to spend correcting my own spelling or correcting my punctuation or rewording things to make them sound better. That's a lot less time and stress off of me. Another way that I use Copilot, and Copilot has impacted me in the short term, has been through creativity and innovation. More so on the creativity side, less on the innovation side. But as you may have taken some of my other modules, you know that I do a lot of different projects. I work on a lot of different things. And a lot of times I will run some of my ideas through Copilot just to get a second set of eyes on things, just to get a different point of view. One of the projects that I'm currently working on right now is a wooden chessboard. In going into this chessboard, I had no idea what I was going to design the pieces to actually be. I used Copilot as a tool to help me figure out what rune I wanted to put on the queen piece for my chessboard, or what rune I should put on the pawns for my chessboard. Copilot didn't tell me what runes to put, but it helped me decide which ones would be the correct ones for these pieces. Now, there are other ways that I can use Copilot and Gemini. That's just one example. I've used Copilot to help me with naming a project. I've sent a picture to Copilot and said, hey, Copilot, this is the project that I just finished. Help me come up with an appropriate name for this project. And Copilot did exactly that. Copilot has helped with improved decision making. If I am looking at a particular situation, I might ask Copilot, hey, this is what I'm facing. What are the pros and cons, and what are the different things that I might be able to do? Copilot doesn't make the final decision for me and never will. I'm the human in this situation. I'm the one that's responsible for all these actions. But I can use Copilot to help me through some of those things because it helps me see things from a different point of view. A personalized user experience is another short-term impact. One of the things that I did with Copilot, it would have been around May of last year. I had Copilot help me with creating a scavenger hunt. My well, at the time she was my fiance, but my now wife and I were going on our honeymoon last year, and I had Copilot write me a scavenger hunt for us to do while we were on our honeymoon. Now, I didn't really tell Copilot a whole lot of specific things other than where we were going and what we were going to be doing there. And Copilot, knowing who I was, having a history of all the different things that I had talked to Copilot about, added in certain parts of the scavenger hunt that I hadn't even thought of, like making sure that we got something that was cat related because both my wife and I love our cats, or making sure that we got something that was wood related because I enjoy woodworking. Those are ways that Copilot has made it a personalized experience for me. And then the final aspect of all of this is the accessibility. A lot of times when I'm working with Copilot, I'm not actually typing anything on a keyboard. I'm actually having a one-on-one voice experience, much the way that I am talking right now. Now, let's talk about some of the long-term impacts of our AI use. One of those long-term impacts is going to be the transformation of industries. And when I say long-term, we're talking several years down the road. We have no idea what the future is going to be like. I'm just spitballing right now. But I can easily see that generative AI and the progression of our AI tools is going to transform the way a lot of different industries do things. It already has in the realm of job seeking. When we look at things like applicant tracking systems, when we talk about resume writing, it has fundamentally transformed the way we look for work. And we're going to talk about that in the next module. Another thing that we see is the evolution of job roles. As a workshop instructor, it is not as much me standing in front of a class actually delivering a presentation. Now I'm doing much more of what I'm doing right now, working with things like PowerPoint and creating online e-learning modules. Well, I'm using Copilot and AI tools to help me build a lot of these tools. Even within my own learning management system that you probably are watching this video on right now, there's AI tools within this LMS to help create different e-learning modules. And that's just in my own specific role. I can't even imagine how this is going to transform copywriting roles, or maybe some kind of creating writing role, or maybe people that generate pictures for content, or whatever the case might be. Now, one of the other long-term impacts that we have to talk about is the ethical impacts. And I was just having a conversation with one of my coworkers literally about 20 minutes ago about this very, very topic. Is it ethical to use AI to write your resume? Well, yes, of course it is. AI is just a tool. It's just helping you enhance that writing. Where we might come into trouble is when we don't know the underlying skill. We're just relying on only Copilot to do it for us. Then we might run into some ethical issues with that, because now we're not actually writing the resume. We're having Copilot write the resume. And if we don't know what's actually in that resume, how are we supposed to speak to that in the interview? Another thing that we might see is advancements in the AI capabilities. And this is where we might get into some of that sci-fi dystopian future type stuff. This is where that Skynet might get thrown around. Is it a scary thing to think about? Oh, of course. That's why it's a thought experiment. That's why we're dreaming about these things. Is it scary to think that we might have an AI that might take over the world eventually? It's a possibility, but that's why we have these regulatory and ethical frameworks in place to help us prevent exactly that. Finally, we might see AI used in global creativity, connectivity, and collaboration. By using things like AI, I am no longer limited to certain language barriers. I can use AI to help me translate things. I already do this on a regular basis using Google Translate. Google Gemini is just the evolution of that, and it's going to enhance the way we use Google Translate going into the future. So let's talk about the differences between Copilot and Gemini. And as far as I'm concerned, which AI you choose to use is largely going to be up to your own preferences and really what you want to do, what you like the most. But there are some fundamental differences between Copilot and Gemini. And this is just based on what I have asked Copilot and Gemini about and what I have experienced by using both Copilot and Gemini. Copilot and Gemini offer some very, very powerful AI tools. They are very powerful AI capable programs, but they can cater to slightly different needs and preferences. While Copilot is great for productivity and the integration within the Microsoft ecosystem, Gemini is great with things like integration within the Google ecosystem. Microsoft's Copilot is very good for things like text generation and code generation, much in the same way, like I mentioned, using Copilot to help you with things like Microsoft Excel formulas. Whereas Google's Gemini, because it has access to the entirety of Google, is very good for things like research and other things like that. Now, some other pros and cons that we might see, let's take a look at Copilot itself. A couple of the pros when we look at Copilot is, of course, the integration that we talked about, the ability to be more productive. Copilot has the ability to automate certain tasks. We have collaboration because Copilot actually helps facilitate real-time document collaboration. Like I mentioned, because Copilot is integrated into Office 365, I could be writing a document in Microsoft Word and talking to Copilot at the same time, and I can essentially be writing that document in Microsoft Word as if I had an expert right there with me helping me write it. There's also the security aspect that comes along with Copilot, and that goes right into that topic we talked about with the data security that Microsoft uses. The versatility that comes with Copilot is pretty big. Copilot is capable of generating text, code, images, and summaries, so it has a lot of different possibilities. But let's talk about some of the downsides. Copilot does have some privacy concerns. While Microsoft has a very robust data security policy, that doesn't mean that it's completely impossible for somebody to gain access to it. So because Copilot does have to access some user data, there can be some privacy concerns. There's also going to be a learning curve to using Copilot. And we're going to talk about that as we get into some of our next modules when we talk about AI 104 and using Copilot for job searching. We also talked about this just a little bit in the last module. We talked about our prompt engineering, being able to create good, robust prompts for AI to be able to use. There's a small learning curve to that. If there wasn't a learning curve, you probably wouldn't be watching this video right now. And another con, if we were to have a negative to using Copilot, is a reliance on technology. Copilot is not a replacement for your own human brain. Copilot is not a replacement for your human ingenuity, your own human intervention. Now let's talk about Google's Gemini. One of the positives that we have with Gemini is what we call multimodal capabilities. Gemini is capable of generating text, images, and it supports also text inputs, image inputs, and voice inputs. So it makes it really nice for different media types. Gemini is also very good at contextual understanding, which is just a fancy way of saying Google understands the way we humans talk. Most people do not talk using proper sentence structure and grammar. Most people talk the way they talk, natural language. And because Gemini is integrated with Google and we talk to Google all the time, Gemini is very good at understanding the way we humans speak. And that makes it a little bit easier to work with. Google also offers real-time translation because it's integrated with Google Translate, just like I mentioned before. And then we have the integration with the other Google products, the Google ecosystem. Some of the things that are kind of a negative to Google Gemini is it does have some limited functionality. Google Gemini isn't going to be available on every platform. Just like I mentioned before, most of my experience with Google Gemini is based off of my work with my phone, not necessarily my work with my computers. Whereas when I'm working with Copilot, I use Copilot a lot more because I'm on my Windows laptop a lot more. There's also going to be some inconsistent performance because it is based off of Google. It may not always work exactly perfect every single time. And then you might encounter some subscription costs. Now, Copilot has the exact same thing. Nobody does anything for free anymore. So with Copilot, you have Copilot Pro, which I believe is about $20 a month. Well, with Google Gemini, you have the exact same thing. There is Gemini Advanced or Gemini Turbo, or whatever buzzword they're going to be using this year, and that is usually about $20 a month. There's a subscription cost to it. If you want to unlock all the capabilities or you want to use Gemini heavily, you might have to pay for that service. Now, these are just a few of the pros and cons between Copilot and Gemini. So this first portion of this module is rather short compared to some of my other videos, but we're going to do a couple of other things. So just as a summary of what we talked about here in this lesson, we did a deep dive into Copilot, what Copilot is, and some of the philosophies behind Microsoft's data security. We also talked about Google Gemini and what it brings to the table, and then we compared both of those. Now we're going to have a couple of other videos, and I'm going to do some live demonstrations of Copilot and Gemini and how to use each and some use cases of those. I'll see you in the next video.